Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And today I'm excited to talk about leadership challenges, and in particular, what are the challenges that face highly disruptive leadership issues that you may have? We're going through a lot of disruption these days, especially with new tools like generative AI. So I would love to talk today about what are those challenges and how do we meet them as leaders. So today, I would love for you to share what are some of your biggest disruption leadership challenges? And also, how do you address them? How are you going about doing that? And if you don't know what the answer is, by all means, ask that. This is a great topic for discussion. And so let's get into it. So I have some information here, some slides I'm going to share. Let me just make sure that you have them so you can see where they are. Um, I'm going to try to put these into the chat, but I think my good friend Jay may also be joining. He can put those into the chat for live for LinkedIn. So one of the things that you can let me just put that in here: leadership challenges. So you can go to my site charlenlee.com, go to uh, and then slash leadership challenges, and you'll be able to get the slides. All right. Let me just put that in. Gotta love doing it right live here. So here we go. All right. So one of the things that I think is so important is that when we think about these challenges, they aren't necessarily they're very similar to the ones you would face in making any change happen, but they are incredibly different when you're trying to create huge amounts of change. So these are some of the changes that we see oftentimes that come up in my discussions with leaders. And this is when I'm just interviewing them for the research or consulting and advising them. But one of the biggest issues is when you're dealing with a lot of change, there's a lot of complexity. We also are oftentimes hearing from the executives and also the people who report to them and across the organization that it's unclear what are we trying to do, how we could do so much of a better job of communicating this. And it's incredibly difficult to do this when the change is big and is complex. We also have resistance to change, lots of reasons for that, conflicts that come up, change fatigue, and of course, a lack of leadership buy in because all of these things aren't happening. And when I say leadership buy in, what I'm talking about isn't necessarily just the top executives, it's the leaders across the organization. Because if they don't believe it, the employees are not going to believe it. So you may say, we want this change to happen. The employees go to the manager like, what do you think? And the manager is crossing their arms and shaking their heads like, this is crazy. That doesn't help your cause for disruptive change. So I'm going to go through today a couple strategies of how to address this. And of course, I'm going to be checking to see if there are any comments here. Please, by all means, let me know if there are issues that you may have. And I just realized that I typed it wrong. Hold on, just give me a second here. Um, this is what happens when I can't hype leadership and challenges. There we go. So get the slides at this site. And the first thing you can do is to create alignment for buy-in and transparency. And this sounds pretty easy, but I think in many ways, alignment is by far the biggest challenge and issue facing disruptive leaders. Again, because it's really hard, it's complex, things are constantly changing. Everyone's looking around at each other going, what are we doing again? And a couple things. First of all, these are the three questions to test if you have alignment in the organization. And you have great alignment if everyone can answer these three questions. First of all, who is your future customer? And I boiled it down because it's much more concrete than saying, what's our vision? What's our strategy? Well, you can say these high level goals to build revenues to a certain level, but that doesn't have real meaning. When you can phrase and express the future in a very concrete way, these are the customers we want to serve. This is who they are, what they do, what they say, what they think, what they feel. You can paint a very complete picture of who that future customer is that you want to solve for, and how what are their problems, what are the things that they need help with, and our vision of how we can support that. The second question then becomes, what's your strategy to meet those needs of those future customers? What's the path and journey we're going to take? And then third, that every single person knows personally what their role is in making that strategy a success. How do you execute on this? What's your role in making sure that we address those needs of the future customer? So again, it may be in the fact that you're focusing on the current customers and you're understanding them and trying to identify ways how you can shift your skills to be able to meet the needs of those future customers. So everybody being aligned around this is such an important thing. And one of the questions becomes, how do you do this? And this is where the planning comes in, especially with being clear about what you're going to accomplish in each of the following 6 quarters. I call this a 6 quarter walk. And it's incredibly powerful because one of the reasons that the 6 quarter walk is so compelling is that you're laying out everybody, this is where we want to be 18 months from now. Here's our vision of where we want to be. Here's our strategy, our execution to get on there. And you have it in enough detail that people understand, for my department, for my role, for this business unit, we can see the responsibilities cascading down to us and what that means for our job, for our team, for our future. And you can see it 6 months, 6 quarters out. And the 6 quarter walk is incredibly interesting because what happens at the end of the first quarter, you're taking an assessment and asking, how are we? How did we meet our expectations for where we would be in Q1? Where are we ahead? Where are we behind? And then you're adjusting the rest of the other 5 quarters and adding another quarter at the end. And what this allows you to do is to constantly adjust to the reality of what is working, what is not. And you're making sure that everyone, again, is aligned to where we want to be 18 months, again, out from where you are. So this is not a shrinking 18-month plan, is a rolling 18-month plan with the idea that transformations are never completely done. But at the end of each quarter, you have an opportunity to celebrate, to discuss and share what went well, what went wrong, and to make sure everyone is, again, on that same page. This reduces the complexity that we talked about before. It also makes sure that you know where everyone is going and you're making the adjustments so that people have the resources to be able to go forward and do the things that they need to. All right, so let's go on to the next area to address, and that is to communicate constantly. I remember this meeting so well. I was at a marketing department offsite, and at the end of the day, the CMO came in, and I asked her, what are your top goals for the year? And she goes, "Oh, I'm so glad you asked. We have all these people here who just did an offsite last month to talk about our goals." And she goes, "Ask them; they'll answer it for you." And they couldn't. They couldn't remember even a single one of their goals, and it was so it was really awkward situation to see them kind of rummaging around in their emails and PowerPoints looking for the answer. And the CMO was just sitting holding her head in her hands like, what's going on here? How come these people don't know it? And the problem is oftentimes as leaders, we think it's one and done. And so what are we going to do? And if we're not going to understand and talk about what our goals are every single day. And one of the best examples of this is I had the pleasure of watching Jeff Weiner, who was the CEO of LinkedIn, now the chairman. I think he's actually left LinkedIn now. But one of the things he did constantly and extremely well was at the beginning of every meeting, he would say something like this. And this was internally and externally. I'm Jeff Weiner, CEO of LinkedIn. Our mission is to connect the world's professionals. And some of the ways we do this is through our values, and he'd name a couple of the values, or he'd name a strategic asset or a strategic goal that they were trying to achieve. And so what he was doing with every single meeting, at the beginning of every single meeting, he was saying, this is what we're trying to do. This is what we're accomplishing. And this is how we're going to get there. And he would do this at the beginning of every meeting. And people by the end would ask, like people were asking, Jeff, you do this all the time. When are you going to stop? And he said, I will stop when people stop looking surprised. And that's the reality of leadership, is that you have to constantly communicate where we are going, where we are today, what are the challenges that we're going to face. And the more you can make this a story of we're going on this journey, we're going on this quest to achieve these goals. We're going to encounter dragons and monsters, and we're going to fight them and slay them. And this is how we're going to do it together as a team. So having that level of consistency of communication is absolutely essential. So let me go on and share a little bit more about the next area, And that is to embrace the messy middle. Now, some of you have seen me talk about this, but I want to talk about it in the context of leadership. So, the messy middle looks something like this. You're starting from a certain place, you're going to get to a new place, and in between, you're going through all these circuitous routes, and it feels not good, it feels awful in many cases. And this is a key reason why people have change fatigue, why they are resistant to change, is because they see that messy middle and they don't want to get into it. So, as a leader, there are two things you have to do. The first thing is to describe what the after looks like and to say, this is why we have to go there, and also why the before, the current state where we're in, is no longer tenable. If people can understand we need to get there and that we're going to go on this journey, that's the very first thing. They have to buy into that vision, into those future customer needs before they will leave this wonderful, comfortable place that they're in today. And the second thing is, if you're going to go into the messy middle and people know it's going to be difficult, they want assurances from you that it's going to be okay. That as you go through this, that it's not going to be so awful that they can't stand it. That it's going to not going to be so fatiguing that they're just going to be exhausted. And so that requires that you build up their agency and the relationship with them even before you begin doing this change. And one of the biggest challenges you hear from employees is this: I don't have permission. They do not believe that if they were going to go into the messy middle, they could raise their hand, raise their voice, and say, this isn't working for me, that anybody would believe them. They don't believe that if they had an idea of how to do things better, that they would be heard, respected, and considered. So it is incredibly difficult to move into the messy middle if you don't have these reassurances in the past that the messy middle will be manageable, that you'll be able to handle the stretching and the stressing that it's going to cause. So I think it's very important for you to define what this looks like. And in particular, just don't assume that because you delegate that people are going to be responsible and accountable. It's only when people feel a strong sense of ownership, of agency over the change, that you'll be able to move people into that messy middle to deal with complexity, to deal with change fatigue, to deal with all the messiness of change. So, a couple of things you can do to help up with that. That first one is to define the edges of what is possible. How many times have you heard, or maybe even said to people, go out there, innovate, take risks? And people go, yeah, you go first and show us how it's going to be done and demonstrate that if it doesn't work out, your head won't be chopped off. So, what's safe? What isn't safe? And I think defining the edges of what is possible, the edges of the box, really creates that focus. It creates this focus on speed. It creates creativity because anywhere inside of this area, you can be safe. And creating that psychological safety is a really important part of being able to be in the messy middle, which you're going to be in for quite a while as you're going through this disruption and change. The other thing you can do is to make sure you take people all the way out to the limits and make sure that people understand this is the edge and this is where we're going to be, because they don't understand how far they can go until they get to that edge and you're with them and the entire team is with them. So, in that messy middle, what you're really trying to do is to define how messy it's going to be, not backing away from the fact it's going to be messy, and making sure that people know that even if they get to the edge, if they should stumble and fall, that you are going to be there, the rest of the team is going to be there to make sure that they are okay. All right. Uh, one other area is to disagree and to disagree extremely well. So, what do I mean by that? It's this idea, and it comes from originally from some ideas. I think Amazon expresses this really well. Disagree and commit. And the idea is that if you are able to disagree really, really well, then you'll be able to bring up all the ideas. That there are nothing left unsaid at the table, because again, if you're going through a lot of change, you're going to have just a lot of conflict. And the bigger the change, the bigger the conflict, the more concerned that people are going to be about what this change means for them. And the more likely that the conflicts will come up. So your job as a leader here is to make sure that instead of trying to resolve everything yourself, that you're developing these conflict resolution skills amongst people. And a real challenge is people don't want to bring up conflict because we put a huge premium on being nice to each other. We put a premium on being respectful, not calling out people, and wanting to keep the peace. You don't want to be seen as a troublemaker. So, making sure that people are having these strong relationship communication skills and center every single conflict around the decision about our vision of what we want to have happen. If everyone is aligned on the vision, then it's a disagreement about how we're going to get there. And it should not be a disagreement on what we are trying to achieve. That ship has sailed. If we're trying to achieve the same things, then we can align around this. And if you are clear that the alignment is there, then you can encourage disagreement to say, hey, at the end of the day, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. Now let's have this robust discussion, this great discussion, and agree and disagree with each other in a very strong and committed way. And at the end, know that whichever way the decision is made, that everyone is going to be committed. So your job as a leader is to foster this disagreement, to create the psychological safety space that people know they can disagree and still be fine and get along. And the key to this is making sure that people are committed, that you are 100% committed once the decision has been made, that no matter whether it's for you or against you, you're going to come with it. And I love this quote from Peter Drucker. The first rule of decision making is that one does not make a decision unless there is disagreement. Because if everybody agrees, you put the proposal, and that was, yeah, that looks good. You know something's wrong, and you want to dig into it more to say, really, there must be some concern. What is that concern? We really want to hear it now because it may impact something. It may be something that we hadn't seen before. We want to mitigate that risk, whatever it is. Make sure that everybody's understanding is going on. And here's the thing: is you may need to move forward, and actually, you should probably move forward with a decision, even if there isn't consensus. Consensus is one of those things where you want everybody to agree so that you can, in the end, point out to everyone, well, we all agreed to do this. So it's all of our collective faults versus saying, I'm taking ownership on this. I'm going to make a decision, create responsibility and accountability for this and transparency about where does the information and the responsibility rest for that decisions. So one of the issues that we face as leaders is, are we willing to stick our neck out there, make that tough decision, and make sure then that people are 100% committed, regardless of whether the decision went their way or not? So I have a great question here from Mark. What are the ways to test if you're ready for the messy middle as both a leader and a contributor, beyond assurances, but small tests, agreeing on unmet needs, et cetera? Mark, you just nailed it. It's about being in the messy middle on a constant basis. So you might take a very small change, and this is where I do believe the idea of small changes being a great stepping stone to big changes. Test it with a small change. And you know that there's a small change, a decision that you have to make. And you're asking people to come and contribute to the discussion. And it's pretty small stakes, but how comfortable can people be at disagreeing and making a commitment? I'll give an example. Where are we going to hold our offsite? What are we going to do at an offsite or a party? And everyone's going to have different ideas. And you set the stage by saying, hey, we need to make a decision. I know we're not going to all not all going to be agreed. We're not going to have our 100% of our needs met because the only way to do that is to go to the lowest common denominator. Instead, we're going to optimize for the best experience possible. So that sets the stage for saying, what is our goal? How are we going to agree to disagree and be comfortable doing that? And at the end, when the decision is made, how can we ensure that everyone is fine moving forward and are committed to making it work? The key, that's the last part. That last part about being committed is one of the most important things. And so as a leader, can you do all of those things? And as a team member, are you ready to accept that it may not be your idea that's accepted, but you will still be 100%? So the work you have to do as a team and as individuals is, how comfortable are you with disagreeing and then also committing? All right, let's go on and talk about the last area here, which is embracing setbacks and failures. Leaders have such a hard time with this because we are expected to be 100% right. Failure is not an option, and that we need to go forward and make sure that everything works. And the reality is, and it rarely works out that way. So, what is your relationship with failure? What does it look like for you as a leader and also for your team? How good are you at accepting, identifying, recognizing it, and then dealing with that failure? What is it? Again, is it healthy? Do you embrace it? Do you acknowledge that it's there? And then allow, therefore, the recovery from it? Or looking at saying, how do we think about this failure and move forward from it? So, a couple things here. First of all, you have to realize that most decisions are reversible. Like 99% of the decisions you make, there are very, very few that are completely irreversible. So spend all your time looking at those things that are irreversible and spending a lot of time on there. But otherwise, if you can change your mind on something, then wrestle with the idea, grapple with the idea of why is it difficult to change your mind, to admit that the direction we set off on was not the right one. We realized it, and we're going to come back and make a different decision. And it comes the key ability to do this is right at the moment when the decision is made. You can say, everything that we have right now, all the information we have, all the data we have, all the research we have says, go in this direction. But we're not 100% sure it's going to work. When we go in that direction, we expect these things to happen. If they don't happen, then we're going to come back and maybe make another decision, plan B, because now we're in a different place. We know more information, and it's actually a different direction we want to be in. So acknowledging right at the very beginning when you make a decision that it may not be right is a huge step forward in creating this expectations. Not that you're hedging your bets, but that we're going to move in this direction. Hopefully, it's the right one. But if it isn't, we are prepared to take a different route and change our minds and go in a different direction that may be better because we have more information now. So this is a key area that I find oftentimes leaders having a big challenge. They don't want to move into a new space unless they know 100% they're going to be successful, because otherwise you might get the wrong issues. You might be raising up you might be, again, penalized in your career if you don't make the right decision. So in order to do this, make sure you're doing it inside of your team, that when they begin to make decisions, when they develop agency, that ownership, to be in that messy middle, to take changes and stride and to take actions on them, reassure them, give them that psychological safety that as long as they stay inside that box, you're fine to experiment, see what happens, make a wrong decision. And every single time you are learning and getting better and advancing the team. That's a huge benefit. If you try something and it didn't work, of course, if you try something and it works, that's awesome. But there's value and benefits in trying something and seeing that it doesn't work. And for us to embrace that as leaders and as team members is a really important step in overcoming all of these challenges. All right, so that's what I have for today. A couple other. No, I think that's all I have for today. All right, there was one last time, but it's I already talked a lot about what that was. So that's what I have for today. I just encourage you to think about all of these challenges that you have as a leader, and to engage fully in embracing all of that change, because one of the ways that we advance as leaders is to look at these challenges with clear eyes, to be able to see them, not push them aside, and to embrace them as much as possible. And I find that the biggest thing you can do is anticipate what these challenges are going to be, because every leadership journey has these types of challenges when you're trying to create change. Anticipate these challenges and then be ready to disrupt those challenges, to really come up with the actions that you need in advance in anticipation of them. Everything from addressing complexity with that plan to transparency, making sure everyone knows what's going on, and addressing things like resistance to change and change fatigue with some of these techniques. All right, a couple last things. Next week, I'm going to be talking about AI agents. I've been looking at them, playing with them, going to various hackathons with them, and it's if 2023 was the advent and year of generative AI, I do believe that 2024, we're going to see some very interesting activities with AI agents. So I want to talk about what they are, if they're real or not. Are they another fad? Is it a flash in the pan? And what you need to do to prepare for them, and how to even potentially build one for yourself. All right, so good luck with your leadership challenges and driving disruptive change. And I look forward to talking to you next week. Thanks.